Welcome back to this continuing saga. Now, one of the problems with doing this job is that I've become obsessed with the clutch part of it. And I'm not saying that that's not the problem, but I completely overlooked something. Follow along with me here. That sure looks like a bodge to me. I'm pretty sure that's just a washer crammed on there. Now, I'm kind of reluctant to take it off though, because the splines do travel farther back there, and this thing's pretty much flat, so if it were to travel the whole way in, would it not hit these bolts? Why is that there? Because that's not factory. And the parts diagram shows nothing there. Stand by. Alright, I removed that, and there is actually a groove cut in here. Actually, it's more like a step. It's not really a groove so much as a step. I don't know if I can... There we go. That's a pretty good shot. So that's interesting. This piece here, I bent it a little bit, cutting it and twisting it off, but I didn't bend it that much. This thing's all kinds of hammered and distorted and ugly. And as I predicted, is if you put this guy on, then it hits the hardware behind there. But it doesn't take much. You don't have to move it out a whole lot. It just needs a little bit. And it clears. So, something belongs here, or this is wrong. It sure looks like it would be original to the bike. So, more homework. Well, it took a long time to find it, but I think I figured out what that is supposed to be. So if you follow my little cursor here, you would expect it to be shown out here. This is the shaft that passes through the gearbox. That's the sprocket for the chain for the rear end. And then the shaft would stick out this way into the primary case. But it doesn't show it there, but this guy right here, number 8, it's called a spacer. And looking at the picture of it on Hitchcock's website, I think it's the same thing as what I cut off of mine. The spacer, it might have actually been the original spacer and not just a washer, but the thing is so hammered, it looks like somebody pounded it on there, or something was loose and it machined it halfway to death or something, but it's a real mess. So we're going to order that, and we're probably going to order the 2 major clutch parts. I got permission from the owner to spend the money, even if it is an experiment. He said no hard feelings if it doesn't fix it. So we'll order that from Hitchcock's, and when that arrives, we'll see what we can do with it. Well, we have received our order from Hitchcock's, and the new clutch parts have arrived. Now, this is the new assembly I put together with the snap ring, and it still has a little bit of play here. which I wasn't sure if it was the way it should be or not, but it was the same on this one. I mean, it has to have some place that this will spin. So that seems to be okay. These are two new parts, so that makes sense. The design is a little bit different. Comparing them here in this, you can see the center is like a conical shape where this one's just flat. And on the back side, it's slightly different there. That one, the teeth go the whole way out, so I don't think any of that's going to matter. But the other thing that we ordered is still a problem. This is the spacer that I thought went where this one was, but it's obviously not the same. Doesn't fit that shaft at all. So we're back to needing this, which does not appear in the parts diagram anywhere. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. This one, the seal with these bolts on it, which is where the problem seems to lie, is the same on my 5-speed. But I was watching a video of another fellow rebuilding one of these, and he was working on a Redditch 350, and it does not have this plate. It just has a seal that goes in here with no plate that it's mounted to. So I didn't see a spacer on his, but there almost has to be one there. So I guess the next step is just to go down to the local hardware store and see if we can find some kind of spacer or thick washer or something that can go on there and take up that space. So that's disappointing. Can't put it back together yet. So stay tuned as the traumatic story of the clutch continues. Back to Clutch Nightmare, episode, what are we up to, 27 or something? Okay, so here's where we're currently at. I'm going to bring you up to speed here. This is the washer, the spacer washer that I originally took off that's all knackered, and I had to cut it to get it off because it was jammed on there. This is the hardware store equivalent replacement. The thickness is similar, very close. The diameter is different, but the ID is the same. We don't really care about the outside diameter. That doesn't really affect anything. So in a pinch, we could use that. It probably is the same as what that was. But I don't like the idea of sticking a soft metal washer in there that might wear. So I contacted Hitchcock's about this and said, hey, this has got some kind of wonky spacer in there that I can't find. We tried this one, as we showed in a previous installment, and that was just massively too big. That's actually for the inner part of the gearbox. I took a wild stab at that and was wrong, so that's no good. And they told me that there is a part on the Redditch models that is a spacer that goes in there, and they sell it for the Indian versions when the shaft wears, and it's supposed to take up that play, and it looks like that, which is kind of nice because it's got the splines cut out in it. And for about US $10, it should be pretty nice because that's expensive for a washer, I think. But it is what it is. So there's that guy, and the thickness is quite a bit thicker, as you can see. It's almost nearly twice as much, probably. I haven't measured it with the calipers or anything, but just eyeballing it, that looks like it's going to be definitely wider. So I have one of these on right now, and as far as function, it works fine. Just piecing it together and spinning it makes enough clearance. But I'll stick this on and see where we wind up, because this is obviously a better part. It's probably hardened and it won't be much longer lasting. So we got that. Now, the other thing I got was I went to this roller bearing release arm, and these are supposed to be better. It's an upgrade for any of the bullets, but you have to replace this piece so that it goes with it, because the original doesn't have the cutout for that bearing nose to sit in, which is fine because at this point this is the only piece yet that seems like it might be warped and be causing this problem. So I'll take you over here and try to show you again where we are. I only have 3 springs in here just for the purposes of testing to see if it made any difference. I've got the clutch clamped in the pulled back position. So I don't know that I can do this with one hand. I need to get a tripod. I don't know why I didn't get one yet. So this will spin, and it spins better than it used to. And I think this basket that we had originally, it was a little mangled looking on the backside, and I think the bearings were probably not very good. So this spins a lot better, but it does still drag at certain spots. And I don't know that I can show you this, but as you rotate this around the basket, you can see that it kind of, I don't think it's the basket, yeah, that looks like it's back. I'm not showing it. It doesn't work that way, I'm sorry. I have to hold the basket and then spin this, and then you would see, anyway, that this thing looks like it wobbles. Which would go hand in hand with everything else that I've tried to replace or diagnose on this thing. So, I mean, the basket here, this is brand new. We know that's not the problem. We know this inner part that spins in it is brand new. That's not a problem. The center plate was replaced. The front and back plates were replaced previously. They're all but new. And 2 of the 3 clutch discs were replaced, and I've checked and checked and checked them, and I don't think they're the problem, because it looks like most of the wobble happens out here on the very end, which would kind of tell me it might be this end plate. If it is not this end plate, and this is wobbling at the outer portion, that's leading me then to go to something with the gearbox, which I really don't want to deal with. But we'll see. We'll put these new parts in and see what happens. I'm not sugarcoating this or editing out the parts that don't work, because I want you to follow along with my nightmare as I proceed here. And we'll see what happens. So let's do that, and then I'll report again. All right, so we have installed the new plate, new release rod, and the thick tooth spacer behind. Now, the first thing I noticed was, when I put this all together, my clutch lever has no action whatsoever, which is kind of weird. Now, that could be because of the extra space put in between due to the spacer that's moved all of this out away from the rod. So there could potentially be some adjustment that would need to be made there on the transmission side. But having put all this together, now I spin this. Let's see if I can show this to you somehow, but you see this thing wobble? The whole thing seems to wobble in and out. Which is disconcerting. So, not sure why that's happening. Off camera, I tried multiple combinations of things, and it seemed like I was making some progress with this new pressure plate, but we really haven't. One of the things I did try this this tooth spacer, but it moved everything out really far. And Hitchcock's does note that you might have to machine the back of the clutch to take up some of the space it uses up, because with that in, I couldn't. The clutch didn't work at all. The whole basket and everything was moved out, so it's farther away from the clutch rod. So I don't know if there's enough adjustment to compensate for that fully or not. So I didn't do that. I put the hardware store washer in. Again, just doing this kind of as an experiment at this point, but that seemed to fit better, and I got some clutch action right off the bat. So I didn't have to adjust the cable at all, but I did have to adjust the pivot over the transmission. However, now that we have this all together, and I was hopeful that it would actually work properly, it is the same as it was before. So I broke all the rules, and what I did was I started screwing in the transmission adjustment here, and you're only supposed to thread this in till it makes contact, just barely makes contact, and even back it off a little bit, because if you have it in too far, most of the time it'll make the clutch slip. So I decided to just try anything at this point, and have been screwing this in and screwing this in, and I have this thing screwed in probably one full turn beyond contact, maybe even more now, and I can get the clutch to release, but there's still some drag, which is extremely disappointing. So that tells me that there is something else going on here, and I don't know what yet. I don't know if I can do this. Hold on a second. Let me put you on pause. Okay, we're back. I put a clamp on the clutch lever, so it's now fully released. And I can spin this. It's relatively not completely free. I mean, there's still some drag there, but we still have the same problem. You know, look and see this wobble I'm getting. Brand new parts throughout. Sorry, it's not focusing right for some reason. But you can see this clearly. That I'm getting a massive gap, and then it'll close up as you spin it around. So there's a wobble in there, and I think that's what's causing this, because you know, you can tell it's making contact with the disc. So I'm thinking now it's something in the gearbox, which is just lovely. So I may post this up for everybody to see who's been following along, and see if anybody has any brilliant ideas, because I'm kind of out of things to do on this side. Post below.